Veterans History Project interview with James A. Reeves. It's August 15th, 2003 in Pampa, Texas. Reeves served in the U.S. Army in Europe. He was a corporal. The interviewer is Bill Lucas. Describe when you heard about Pearl Harbor and what effect did it have on you and your family?
Well, when I first heard about it, I was over at Borger with my sister on a deal, and as far as effect on our family, it didn't have a whole lot at the time. I had some relatives that are still in Pearl Harbor that were on a ship down there, but that don't cut any ice either.
You were living in Borger at the time?
No, I live in here, but I was over there.
Oh.
We were on a field trip. My sister was a school teacher over there and stuff, and I was over there with her that Sunday that we heard about it. No, I was in high school here at the time.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted.
When did you enlist?
When?
Yes.
In March '43.
And why did you pick the branch of service that you did?
I didn't. I took my test and was supposed to go in as an aviation cadet. They swore us in at Lovett and informed me I was in the Army, I'd go where they damn well pleased. I wound up at Fort Knox, Kentucky, an armored outfit, tanks, basic training. I couldn't get anything done, and then they put me in maintenance schools at Fort Knox. And I got in with a warrant officer there, and he knew where I was going to be. They kept telling me I couldn't do anything because I wasn't assigned. And then they assigned me to the 16th Armored Division. That warrant officer would give me the address of a name of a warrant officer in division headquarters there, and I got a hold of him. He got me transferred to the Air Corps. I wound up at Little Rock, Arkansas. Then I was at Sheppard Field. And they come in there at 2 o'clock in the morning, washed out the whole wing because we'd come from ground force units and they was getting ready to, that invasion over there in Europe. They needed more ground fodder than they did air fodder. So I went back to an armored outfit. I went overseas with them.
Do you recall the first days in the service? What was it like?
You really don't want to know. Because we left here, in fact there's still 2 others that went with me. We were on, there's about 75 of us, I guess, left here that day. We went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Of course, we had to go through the process of getting shots and issued clothes and stuff, and then they split us up. And we went to various outfits all over the United States. But that first day is just all chaos.
Tell me about your boot camp training experiences.
I didn't understand you.
Please tell me about your boot camp and training experiences.
There wasn't any boot camp at that time. It was just basic training. I wound up at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and we started in on orientations and military training, and we was in the field most of the time, and it was just a long series of long, hard marches and familiarization with tanks and different armored vehicles and weapons. And then I wound up they sent me to maintenance schools. and I didn't want to be a damn mechanic. And an old colonel got me in there and told me he couldn't make me do anything, but he could make me wish I did. He put me out there in what they had as demonstration regiment at that time. And we were decontaminating tanks that was running through different poisonous gas swallers and stuff. I had about 6 weeks of that, and I went back to maintenance school and graduated top of my class. But I was still trying to get out and get in the Air Corps. That's where I thought I wanted to be. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But when, of course, our whole aviation cadet wing were made up of men that had come from ground force units and got in there. And they washed us all out there at Sheppard Field. I went to Fort Bliss down in El Paso. From there, then I went to Abilene, and from there I went on the troop train from there to Camp Shanks, New York. We went clear across Ontario, Canada, back in Buffalo, New York, down through there, and then I got on the lovely little ship of Empress of Australia, 12,000 more of them, and we crossed over to England and landed in my mind went blank. Well, elsewhere.
Was this your first trip out of the United States?
No, I'd been to Old Mexico several times. That was the first time I'd been on a ship. But, well, I hate to be that stupid, but my mind went blank. But that is my first introduction to the English people when we got there. But I went to a place called Tidworth Barracks there in England. Then I got on an LST at Southampton. And I got off on the beaches of Normandy. And when it was over with, I was up above Innsbruck, Austria, to Brenner Pass. But we was all over Europe. They used, you're probably not familiar with the way they used armored outfits. They was all shook up about them and running out of fuel and stuff here in this deal to Iraq. And hell, we did the same thing 60 years ago. That's the only thing I know of that Patton did that I thought was right. We were spearheading the Third Army, and he got us out there, I guess we was 40 or 50 miles ahead of the infantry, and run out of fuel. He went and commandeered a Red Bull Express convoy, which was made up of niggers, and he brought them up there and brought us fuel. But they shuffled us around. We were under the American First Army for a while. The American Third Army, which was Patton, and then the Seventh Army. And we served under the French First Army for a while. We were down in the Alsace-Lorraine district of France and Germany, and down that Colmar sector. And that is my first experience with those people too. And you sure had to be real careful. They carried great big knives and wore turbans. And when they wasn't drinking. No, there's pretty good people, but most of the time they was drinking. It's pretty tough. Of course, after they got into all that junk, Paris, we got a troop of those niggers that they give the choice of coming back here to Leavenworth or coming to combat units, and we had some of them. They was more dangerous than the Germans because all those little old towns over there were undermined with wine cellars, and they'd get that wine, champagne and stuff, get drunk, stay drunk, and they'd kill one another, and then they'd try to kill us. But we didn't think too highly of them. They didn't think too highly of us. Doesn't either here or there either.
What exactly were your duties?
My function was primarily driving a light tank as a communications vehicle between the command of the division and the combat command units of the division. We were wherever we needed to be to keep radio contact with the different combat commands and division headquarters.
Did you participate in any well-known battles?
Well, I don't know how well known they were, but I've got some little stars says I was in them. But yeah, I was there at the Bulge. We was in a place there, Herlisheim. And there again, we was out of fuel before it was over with. Couldn't get around. But we was in several of them through there. But we didn't know where we were half the time. They'd just give us maps, grid coordinates, tell us where we had to be. And most of the time we was sitting out on some place where they could keep radio contact with, because we didn't have the communications that they've got now. You could park that tank under a tree and they couldn't get any reception, and they couldn't send anything either. But
Can you describe some of the the feelings or sounds of being in a tank?
can I describe them? Well, they's either hot as hell or cold as hell, and dirty, and of course that light tank we had a 37 millimeter artillery piece and a 30 caliber bow gun and a 50 caliber coaxial gun, and that's all the armament it had. And when we first started out, I had my standard weapon was what we called a grease gun. There's an old M3 submachine gun, just kind of like a tin can, with a bolt on it. When that bolt come back, if you didn't catch it with the lid, it went forward and fired a 45 caliber round. The concussion knocked it back and it'd fire another one. But most of us got rid of them pretty quick. Got us some carbines, or after we got up there, and we got some German burp guns, and we carried them instead of that damn thing. It crippled more of our people than it did the Germans, because you just sit down and bump it against something. If you didn't have that lid fastened on it, why, it liable to bounce back and fire.
Did your tank have a name?
No, we didn't name it. Some of them did, but we never did have a name on that. We swapped off. We had take turns when we was in assembling areas and rest areas. And we had to drive an old M8. We had an old M8 armored car in the company, and us drivers had to swap off and use it to escort the ration trucks back times. And an old M8 armored car they were lighter than the light tank. They had 6 wheels on them, and the whole front end of them opened up when they was open, and you sitting there with your legs over that metal over the front end of it, and it rained and snow in there, and you'd freeze your britches to it, and it'd tear you out of there when you got out. If you slid off the road, the turret liable to spin around and knock you in the head. It had a 37mm artillery piece on it. But
Can you-
we swapped around, drove half tracks and stuff, and then of course after the war's over, they broke our division up. I went to 6 Corps headquarters. If I could have kept things like that, I'd have probably still been there if they'd have kept me. Because I, for a long time, drew rations for 5 mess halls, scattered them out each day, and then I was through and do what I was pleased. We had about 15 head of German Olympic horses there, and an indoor arena and an outdoor arena. I've always been a horse nut anyway, so I had a picnic. Then they come out with liquor rations for enlisted men. I wound up with that detail. I had to take 3 6x6s and a weapons carrier we were stationed there in Esslingen, just a little ways out of Stuttgart, Germany. And we went to Brussels, Belgium, and back down into Reims, France, and then back in there to Stuttgart. With the liquor rations for the whole 6 Corps area. We made that trip once a month. The rest of the time we run around wherever we wanted to all over Europe. And played.
Can you tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences?
I guess getting off that LST is one of them. I don't know how them poor devils did it in the Pacific where they had to go from island to island and get off on them things. That one trip was enough to do me from now on. And of course we did, that was the first time we took Mr. Patton to the Rhine River and crossed the pontoon bridge across the Rhine in the dark in that tank. That bridge is sitting just under the water. They had them engineers out there directing us with those wands. And it'll kind of raise up on you because that thing just sinking and running out ahead of you on that tank. In the dark, you can't see anyway. But I guess the worst thing I had was getting off that LST, and then when we pulled in there and relieved the 4th Armored, I had to help recover the crew's 5 tanks 188 had got. Then we got our mess up there. They had little cards in there telling us about 88 fever. I can still remember that pretty well. They informed us that it was all a myth that an 88 couldn't penetrate our tanks, and I'd help take what was left of them old kids out of them tanks. That 88 had gone through both sides of the turret and through the breech of that 75. Scattered them through there like a bunch of spaghetti. Blowed up that ammunition in them baskets. And you couldn't take a cutting torch and cut through there like that thing went. It had 5 of them sitting out there that 188 had got. I was really surprised. Of course, that don't mean nothing either. Here a while back, they had a deal on the 3rd Armored, and in that deal, they admitted how inferior our armament was to the Germans. Our medium tanks didn't stand a chance with that German Mark IV. That 75 we had wouldn't do nothing. We finally got there towards the end. We got one tank in our company that had that 90 on it, and it was pretty good. But that 75, just like spitting on that wall, shooting at them with them. Of course, that 37 wasn't all it's good for as a man. It wasn't no good for nothing else.
What was your impression of the Germans and their skill and their equipment?
They had good equipment, and they were pretty darn good people on it. They could tear you up pretty good. Their civilians swore they didn't know anything about what was going on, but I don't know, they may not have. But we were up against some of their most elite panzer units, as they called their armored, and they could sure make us hunt a hole every once in a while. Of course, we got in there on that Siegfried line, and we never got across that darn thing, because we didn't have anything to get rid of them cones they had out there they called tiger teeth. We couldn't get across them with them tanks. And they had quite an underground village built in that thing. They had railroads down there and everything else. They could go a long ways, do a lot of things. Our bombs didn't penetrate them. Our artillery sure didn't. It was a pretty good deal. French built their Maginot there from it, but there again, they didn't know what they was doing. Germans took them, didn't even have to break a sweat.
What was actual combat like?
I don't know how to tell you what it was like. Everybody was scared to death all the time. Of course, you'd do things, and then after it's over, you'd laugh about it and talk about it, but at the time, you just running on automatic. You didn't know what you was doing or where you were or what else. You just doing what you had to do to keep from being killed. Still have nightmares about it sometimes. But that don't do anybody any good either.
Are there any in particular that you still remember?
Yeah, I still remember a lot of things. That you wake up in the night, I guess I always will. And it's been hard on my wife and my kids, because if I'm startled even yet, I'm liable to hurt somebody. And even after all these years, somebody startled me, I'll go berserk sometimes. And of course I'll wake up, or I don't wake up in the night. But they couldn't, even yet, if I'm asleep or something, they don't touch me because I blow up. And I don't know how to describe it to you.
Did you ever meet General Patton?
Some of it stood closer to me than you are when he made his little speech about blood and guts when he told us we was going to take him to the Rhine River. That is the closest I ever was to him. Of course, I saw him when they sent him back to Fort Knox. I was still at Fort Knox when they come damn near cashiered him out and sent him back. He was over the armored command there at Fort Knox at that time. Of course, we saw him, but he stood on that hood of that Jeep right out in front of my vehicle, and he told us we was going to take him to the Rhine River. Didn't make a damn how many of us had killed. And he was right, we did.
What did you think of him?
I thought he was a bunch of shit. I still do. I don't know that that old kid didn't kill him on purpose. I know he's supposed to be a hero, but I don't think much of it. Like I said before, the only thing I thought he did good is when he commandeered that Red Ball Express and brought us fuel. But it's his fault we was out there where we were too.
Was there anything you did for good luck?
For good luck. I had a little crucifix on my dog tag chain. I guess that's considered a good luck.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
No. I never did anything spectacular. That's what I told John when he was trying to get me to come up here. I told him this a waste of time. I was just a peon in a big outfit.
How often did you stay in touch with your family?
Oh, we wrote back and forth about as often as we could. We didn't always have access to mail stuff.